So I wanted to tell you about, there's the Rand Corporation. You know what the Rand Corporation is, right? So they're the ones who do all the dirty work for the government. They're the ones who had the Pentagon Papers that got stolen by Daniel Ellsberg, and then he released them, and it blew the roof off the Vietnam War that we'd been lied to by 4 successive administrations. Caitlin Johnson tweets out, I feel like we don't talk enough about the fact that the 2019 study commissioned by the U.S. Army found that the U.S. could advance its geostrategic interests in Eurasia by baiting Russia into overextending itself in wars against U.S. proxies in Ukraine and elsewhere. So you're not going to hear Ali Velshi bring this up as he manufactures consent for war and says he's not. This is the paper, Extending Russia, competing for advantageous ground. Competing from advantageous ground. Recognizing that some level of competition with Russia is inevitable. RAND researchers conducted a qualitative assessment of cost-imposing options that could unbalance and overextend Russia. Such cost-imposing options could place new burdens on Russia, ideally heavier burdens than would be imposed on the United States for pursuing those options. The exact opposite's happening. Russia's doing better than ever. The West, the United States, is having high inflation, high gas prices, energy prices. Imposing deeper trade and financial sanctions would likely degrade the Russian economy, especially if such sanctions are comprehensive and multilateral. Thus, their effectiveness will depend on the willingness of other countries to join in such a process. But sanctions come with costs, and depending on their severity, considerable risks. Providing lethal aid to Ukraine would exploit Russia's greatest point of external vulnerability. But any increase in U.S. military arms and advance to Ukraine would need to be carefully calibrated to increase the cost to Russia of sustaining its existing... So do you see what Rand... They're laying out what we did. This is another economic war with another economic foe. And so we're pretending we're fighting for liberty and to save Ukrainian people when we're actually instigating them to invade Ukraine, so we can use that as an excuse to ramp up our sanctions and commit an economic war that involves a real war. That's what we're doing. And it's all right here in this paper, and nobody ever talks about it. Let me bring in Jackson. Why do you think nobody ever talks about this paper?
Well, it's extremely damning. You know, it's like, it's the same way that they never bring up the leaked cables from WikiLeaks that show William Burns was fomenting an ambition to destabilize Russia through a war in the Donbass back in 2008. They don't bring up this stuff because it highlights the fact that this is not a quote unquote illegal Russian invasion that came out of nowhere. This was coordinated and planned and orchestrated for many years.
And it's right here in black and white. Look at this. Look at this. This is from that report. This is what they wanted the United States to do. Encouraging domestic protests, meaning protests inside Russia, and other nonviolent resistance would focus on distracting or destabilizing the Russian regime and reducing the likelihood that it would pursue Isn't that what they said Russia did to the United States during the 2016 election? That they fomented discord with their $50,000 in Facebook ads? And that they caused us to hate each other and tried to destabilize us? But isn't that what they said Russia did? And that's bad? But here we are planning to do it to another country. Mm-hmm. But the risks are high, and it would be difficult for Western governments to directly increase the incidence of or intensity of anti-regime activities in Russia. So interfering with internal operations in an attempt to destabilize another country. Who wrote this study? Putin? This is what we're the bad guys. The United States are the bad guys. The United States are the bloodthirsty warmongers for profit. The United States are the world's terrorists. It's not Al-Qaeda. It's not al-Nusra. It's not anybody except the United States. Mm-hmm. So let me, Craig, would you like, what would you like to say about this RAND document?
Well, first of all, they're just a think tank, so there's just a coincidence that, you know, everything happened the way it did, I guess, is what they're trying to tell us. And, you know, we learned a lot about this. People who pay attention to Ukraine for quite some time, 2014, right? We got all the information beforehand. We understood who Victoria Nuland, working with Jeffrey Pyatt when they were handing out cookies on the Maidan, who they would have as the next leader. And that person was the next leader. And they even said, the other guy that was, I believe, was Vitaly Klitschko. No, let's keep him over here. So everything happened the way it said it would happen. And this also reminds me a lot of Wesley Clark. Remember Wesley Clark talked about he got the information? Oh, it's just worse. It's not just Iraq. We're going to go into Syria, Libya, Lebanon, this country, that country. So, a lot of times I question why this information comes out. Like, it seems like it's a controlled release of information. So I try to look at things that way. Like, why are they telling this right now when they clearly are caught, fomenting and planning a war before time? So I that's the thing that I struggle with is like, why are they showing this? Why do we get a hold of this?
Look at the stuff that they recommended. Reposturing bombers within easy striking range of key Russian strategic targets.
Well,
reposturing fighters so that they are closer to their targets than bombers. Deploying additional tactical nuclear weapons to locations in Europe and Asia. Repositioning U.S. and allied ballistic missile defense systems to better engage Russian ballistic missiles and goad Russia into a costly arms race by breaking out of the nuclear arms control regime.
Mm-hmm.
More stuff they wanted to do, increasing U.S. forces in Europe, increasing European NATO members, ground capabilities, and deploying a large... This is also they can goad Russia into doing what they did in Ukraine so we could have a proxy war. So we could beat them. So then we can then institute economic sanctions and we could have them, we could beat them economically. That's all. So we can sell more liquefied natural gas to Europe. We're the terrorists. Most of the options discussed, including those listed here, are in some sense escalatory, and most would likely prompt some Russian counter-escalation. That's what they want. Thus, besides the specific risks associated with each option, there is additional risk attached to a generally intensified, you mean like a fucking war? And our economy getting crushed the way it is? Finally, although Russia will bear the cost of this increased competition less easily than the United States will, both sides will have to divert national resources from other purposes. We're doing it to ourselves. On purpose.
Mm-hmm.
On Ukraine, this is what Rand said. Proxy competition of this sort is not new. The renewal of such maneuvering marks a return to a form of geopolitical competition that some analysts argue took a brief hiatus after the end of the Cold War, when the United States was left as the lone superpower and the ideology of liberal democracy seemed to reign supreme. The United States could also become more vocal in its support for NATO members for Ukraine. It's every fucking thing they've said in this paper we've done.
Just a coincidence, Jimmy.
Craig, an increase in U.S. security assistance to Ukraine would likely lead to a commensurate increase in both Russian aid to the separatists and Russian military forces in Ukraine, thus sustaining the conflict at a somewhat higher level of intensity. They're literally planning out how to do a war for profit. Go ahead.
I was listening to the Oliver Stone Putin interviews last night, and it was so funny because it just everything traces back to U.S. escalation. He's discussing the fact that the U.S. pulled out of the ballistic missiles agreement we had, and if they do something, we're gonna have an equal and counter response. And Oliver Stone asked Putin, hypothetically, if there was like a war in your territory between Western proxies and you guys, who would the U.S. win? And Putin just said no, they would not win. Now we all knew this was going to happen. Putin said it, Rand said it, Burns said it, Newland. They all knew this, but it's just going to make a bunch of money for the MIC.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, the nuclear treaty that was trying to be extended, when Tulsi Gabbard was trying to extend it, guess who shot it down? Liz Cheney and Seth Moulton.
I just want to show you, this is my last thing I'll show you on this, to show you how much they don't give a shit about people. Such escalation might extend Russia. Eastern Ukraine is already a drain. Taking more of Ukraine might only increase the burden, albeit at the expense of the Ukrainian people. Hey, so the Ukrainian people are going to get effed in this. But, you got to break a few eggs, huh? To sell some liquefied natural gas to Europe. Huh? So they know who they're punishing. And they don't give a shit because it's not them.
They said we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian, by the way, and they are.
They even said it. They even know. They go, such a move might also come at a significant cost to Ukraine and the U.S. prestige and credibility. This could produce disproportionately large Ukrainian casualties, territorial losses, and refugees. All of that is happening. It might even lead Ukrainian into a disadvantageous peace. And that is happening now, too, because there was a potential for peace in April, and the West killed it. And now Russia is like, hey, we're done. You had your chance to negotiate. Now we're just going to do it the way we're going to bomb your infrastructure. We're going to take out your power. We're going to fuck you up now. We gave you a chance. And you kept listening to NATO and you wouldn't negotiate. And now you're going to pay the price. Who? Ukraine. The people of Ukraine. Anything you like to add before we say goodbye?
Yeah. Just remember when Bojo said no to Zelensky back then in April. That's what I'm remembering.
When who said no?
Bojo, Boris Johnson. They said they wanted
yes.
to get a peace agreement. Boris Johnson went over there, but there was so many people that said no. It wasn't just Boris Johnson.
Right.
It was everybody. Biden said no. Bojo said no. So it's a shame because the Ukrainian people. And is this any different to what they did to in Afghanistan when they pumped a bunch of money into the Mujahideen to fight the Russians to drain them? We have a history of doing this. Iran Contra. We don't care. We don't give a damn.
This is what we do.
The only difference is Ukraine's about to have a very cold winter.
Yes.
As is all of Europe.
I wonder when these people are going to stand up against this shit. They're just letting their leaders do this, and everyone sees what's happening. It's nuts. Ukraine is if you're pro-Ukraine war, you're a dupe, and you're drinking propaganda. All right, everybody, check out our friend Craig Pasta on the Convo Couch and on his new morning show. What's it called?
It's called AM Wake Up.
AM Wake Up. All right. And everybody check out The Dive with Jackson Hinkle. And tonight he's going to be interviewing Alex Stein. So everybody check that out. Virginia Beach, Richmond, Arlington, San Jose, Miami, West Palm Beach. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets and become a premium member while you're there.